we resumed the debate, no one was catching my eye before we broke, so I think it's for the Minister to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And before I start my response to this group, it's just to note there's been considerable discussion on monitoring of the volume of discharges during this debate. In the interest of time, I will respond to these points when we debate Amendment 13, which is just in the next group, if that's agreeable with everyone. And I'd like to thank the honourable members for tabling these amendments relating to pollution incident reduction plans. So turning to Amendments 23 and 25, tabled by the honourable member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, we agree that companies should be seeking to reduce the impact of pollution incidents in their pollution incident reduction plans. And this, of course, is the core purpose of the plans. This is why the clause requires water companies to set out the measures they will take to reduce the frequency and seriousness of the pollution incidents and their causes. The impact of a pollution incident on people and the environment will be taken into account when the undertaker determines how serious it is, as required in the pollution incident reduction plan. In fact, it would indeed be impossible to determine whether something was serious without looking at the impact the pollution was having. Therefore, these amendments are not needed, and I ask the honourable member to withdraw them. Moving on to Amendment 9, tabled by the honourable member for Epping Forest. I thank the honourable member for proposing this amendment. The Government agrees that national parks form a vital part of our environmental heritage and must be protected. For this reason, the Government has committed to strengthen the statutory purpose of national landscape and national parks to give them a clear mandate to recover nature. We will also strengthen the role that public bodies, including water companies, must play in delivering better outcomes for nature, water, climate and access to nature in these special places through new regulation. Ofwat has made significant funding available to water companies in PR24 to support work to reduce pollution in national parks. As an example, Ofwat approved 4 storm overflow schemes related to improvements in the Windermere catchment, with potential to include 12 additional schemes via the large scheme gated process. We do not believe that it is necessary to include a specific reference to national parks in Clause 2. This is because all sites, including national parks, are already in scope of the duty. Creating a statutory hierarchy of priority sites risks deprioritising other important areas, such as bathing and shellfish waters. For these reasons, the Government will not be supporting this amendment. Turning to Amendment 24, tabled by the honourable member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale. Again, I thank the honourable member for tabling this amendment. The Government agrees that nature-based solutions are an essential tool for tackling the root cause of sewage pollution, while also delivering significant ecological benefits. That is why, in line with the Government's strategic policy statement, Ofwat has allowed companies to increase the use of nature-based solutions, with £3 billion worth of green schemes in water companies' final determinations to Price Review 24. While the benefits of nature-based solutions are clear, we believe their use is better supported through drainage and sewage management plans rather than pollution incident reduction plans. Pollution incident reduction plans are intended to set out the steps that companies intend to take to reduce the frequency and the severity of pollution incidents. These issues are often best addressed via monitoring and maintenance measures such as burst pipe detection, checking pumps and realigning sewers. Drainage and sewage management plans are intended to address the resilience of the whole of the sewage network over a long period of time. This is why the Government has introduced a duty through this bill for sewage undertakers to consider nature-based solutions within their drainage and sewerage management plans. Furthermore, this will ensure nature-based solutions are considered at the very start of the investment planning, increasing their development and potential future delivery. Therefore, this amendment is not needed, and I ask the honourable member to withdraw it. Regarding Amendment 6, tabled by the honourable member for Epping Forest, I agree with the honourable member that improving transparency and accountability is key to the success of pollution incident reduction plans. This is why Clause 2 already requires water companies to publish the implementation report alongside the pollution incident reduction plan. Details regarding where and how to publish the plan and implementation report and in which format may change over the years as technology and best practice evolves. This is therefore best addressed in the guidance in the Environment Agency is producing on how to fulfil this duty. As such, the amendment is not needed, and I ask the Honourable Member...
Would the Minister give
Yes.
way at that point?
Jerome Mayhew.
I'm grateful to the Honourable Minister. She's being very generous with her time. The problem with the position that she's taking now is that it is at variance with the position of the government and the legislation in the Environment Act of 2021, Section 81. If she's right about the efficacy of leaving it up to the Environment Agency buried in their website or their regulations as to where the information should be published, should she also then amend Section 81 of the Environment Act to have consistency?
I thank the Honourable Member for his intervention, and I do understand the point at which she's getting to, which is people need to have access clearly and simply to as much information as possible. My point is, if you put this into the face of the bill, if you put this into law, we might in the future change the way in which we want people to access that information. Technology, best practice may evolve and change, and we will be limited in having to resort to altering through statutory instruments, legislation to enable that to happen. This is why I think it's better that we look at the guidance produced by the Environment Agency to look at the best way continually evaluating how do we present that information. But I think the essence of what he's saying, I completely understand, in that we really all want information to be transparent and clear for everyone, and certainly not buried on a website for anyone. To conclude, I would briefly like to speak to why Clause 2 should stand part of the bill. The occurrence of pollution incidents is unacceptably high and has not reduced in the last 4 years. Water companies must reduce these incidents as a matter of urgency. Currently, sewage companies in England produce pollution incident reduction plans on a non-statutory basis. These plans vary in standard, content and frequency, which makes it hard to scrutinise. It is particularly difficult to identify the progress that companies have made with the actions they committed to in these plans. More transparency and accountability is needed. This is why this clause will require both water supply and sewage companies in England and Wales to publish annual pollution incident reduction plans that address the matters such as the seriousness of the pollution incidents and their causes. These plans will need to set out the actions the water companies intend to take to reduce pollution incidents and an assessment of the impact that these actions will have. In addition, the Secretary of State will be able to direct water companies to include other matters in the plans as needed. As well as this, companies will be required to produce an accompanying implementation report detailing the progress they have made with the measures they committed to in the previous year. Companies must clearly explain the reason for any failures to implement their plans and set out the steps they are taking to avoid similar failure in the future. This will create a high level of transparency, enabling the public and regulators to hold water companies accountable for making the improvements to which they have committed to. Chief executives will be personally liable for the production of these plans and must approve them before publication. If the company fails to publish a compliant plan and implementation report by the deadline each year, the company or chief executive could be prosecuted for the offence. This could result in a fine and criminal record. This emphasises that taking action to minimise pollution incidents should be a core of the chief executive's role. We believe that this provision will ensure the right people with the right incentives lead water companies through the changes necessary to drive down pollution incidents. Furthermore, regulators will be required to take companies' compliance records in relation to implementation reports into account when carrying out their enforcement duties. I therefore hope that all honourable members agree with me on the importance of this clause, and I move that Clause 2 stand part of the bill.
Tim Farr.
I don't know any further comments really from us. I would simply say that we are we're not seeking to move to a vote on any of the amendments that we have put forward. Nevertheless, I think we are concerned that there is not sufficient detail in the bill relating to the impact of pollution incidents on the wider environment, much as I'm grateful for many of the comments that the Minister has made. All the same, we will not seek to trouble the committee with a vote at this stage.
Is everyone content for the amendment to be withdrawn? Aye. Amendment by leave withdrawn. Dr Hudson, do you want to...
Thank you, Mr Vickers. In the interests of Promoting transparency and clarity, we would still like to push our amendment, and equally so in terms of bolstering, supporting and protecting the precious integrity of our national parks. We would like to push that amendment as well. So Amendments 6 and 9 formally we would like to vote on.
Amendment 6 proposed to clause 2 as Amendment 9, proposed to clause 2 on the as on the amendment paper. The question is the amendment be made. Does many of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
To the contrary, no?
No.
No. Division? Happy to proceed? Yep. Lock the doors.
Dan Aldrich. No. Helena Dollymore.
No.
Tim Farron.
Aye.
Catherine Fuchs. No. Amanda Hack. No. Emma Hardy.
No.
Tom Hayes.
No.
Claire Hazelgrove.
No.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Aye.
Jane Kirkham.
No.
Jerome Mayhew.
Aye.
Charlie Maynard. Darren Pappy.
No.
Andrew Pakes. No. David Reed.
Aye.
Jeff Smith.
No.
The ayes were 5 and the noes were 11, so the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. Go to 6 now. Dr. Hudson, do you wish to formally move Amendment 6?
I wish to formally move Amendment 6, Mr Vickers.
Amendment 6 on the amendment order paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Those in favour?
Aye.
No? No. Division? Lock the doors.
Dan Aldrich.
No.
Helena Dollymore.
No.
Tim Farron.
Aye.
Catherine Fuchs.
No.
Amanda Hack. Emma Hardy.
No.
Tom Hayes.
No.
Claire Hazelgrove.
No.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
Aye.
Jane Kirkham.
No.
Jerome Mayhew.
Aye.
Charlie Maynard.
Aye.
Darren Pappy.
No.
Andrew Pakes.
No.
David Reed.
Aye.
Jeff Smith.
No.
The ayes were 5 and the noes were 11, so the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. We now come to the question that Clause 2 stand part of the bill, which has already been debated. The question is that Clause 2 stand part of the bill. Does many of that opinion say aye?
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to Amendment 13 to Clause 3, with which it will be convenient to debate Amendments 14, 3, 15 and 16. I call Tim Farron to move Amendment 13.
Permission, Chair. Thank you very much for calling me. I will formally move 13 and the other amendments in mine and my honourable friend's name, although with your permission I will allow my honourable friend to speak to the bulk of them. I'm just going to focus my remarks on one of this group of amendments, which is Amendment 17. And this is a specific request for inserting into the bill the creation of a position of Minister with specific responsibility for issues relating to the coast. This is something that the All-Party Group on Coastal Communities, chaired by the Honourable Member for Thanet, I understand, is fully in favour of. Coastal communities face a unique set of environmental and economic challenges. They're spread across government departments. It's common sense then, we would argue, to have a minister to bring those together under one portfolio and champion those communities in government. The specific needs of coastal communities were raised in the Chief Medical Officer Chris Whitty's annual report in 2021. So we particularly highlight those communities, obviously in my own part of the world, the Lancashire over the Sands part of my constituency, and also South West Westmoreland, but also places like Norfolk and our communities in Devon, Cornwall and elsewhere. As I said, there is cross-party support through the APPG on coastal communities for this. Just a quick reference to my own constituency. Amongst the challenges that many of the communities around Morecambe Bay face is the pollution of the environment around them. In 2023 alone, one treatment works in Grange over Sands pumped sewage into the Kent Estuary Channel on 79 occasions for 73 hours. And across the water in Arnside in West London, another pumped 42 times for 147 hours. Of course, as well as the environmental and water-related issues that affect coastal communities, there are also economic, health and other issues of great importance to them. And so we believe there is a strong case, and that this bill is an opportunity for us to do that, to make the case for a person in a government whose specific responsibilities are to take care of our coastal areas. My support for our other amendments I think you can take as given, but I will allow my honourable friend to make the case for them.
Sorry, Amendment 13 proposed to clause 3 as on the amendment paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Darren Patrick.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I rise to speak in support of Clause 3 rule, which deals with defining emergency overflows and requires that reporting. Like my honourable friend, the member for Hastings and Rye, I have the great fortune to live on the south coast, but I also have the great misfortune of being under Southern Water's area of being a local provider.
Can I just draw attention to clause? We're debating Amendment 13 specifically. So if you can restrict your comments to that. Yeah, go ahead. Charlie Maynard in that case.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, I will address 13, 14, 15, 16 and NC 25, unless you would like to play it differently.
Not 25.
Okay, clear. Okay, so 13 is about volume. And this is adding volume to the list, and I'm just going to read out this. The list in section 1 says location of the emergency overflow when the discharge began and when the discharge ended, and what we're seeking to add is the volume of discharge, which is very common sense in terms of, as many people have already said in the room, we want to know how much sewage is coming out. And we're really looking for all members' help on getting this into the bill, because if we're serious about solving our problems in our rivers, we really want to know how much sewage is coming down. Of course.
Thank you. I'm very grateful for the member for giving way, and also for the conversation we had over the lunch recess. One of the challenges that we have with measuring of volume is volume of what? The industry estimates that 97+% of volume from a storm event is water, it's just rainwater. How does his series of amendments address the measurement of what is being passed? And is there something where we could cooperate?
Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, my honourable gentleman. So let's just talk about the spectrum of information here. We've got a number of spills where we have no idea how long those spills went on. Then we've got EDMs, event discharge monitors, event duration management monitors, which count how many hours of pollution. Then we have the volume of flow, and then we've got various kind of iterations around that. Well, you might want to measure dissolved oxygen or whatever it might be. Where I am here is I don't want the perfect to be the enemy of the good. We need to be making progress. Thames Water is installing flow monitors all over its network, upstream of its sewage treatment works, but not downstream. And this is because they are scared about actually having to count and have it in the public domain what volume of sewage that they are dumping. As my colleague Josh Babarinde said, it's like, look, if you've got a Coke bottle of sewage and you don't know how dilute it is, you still don't want it in your own bath. And that counts. So yes, of course we want to know how dilute it is. That would be nice. But really what we want to be moving forward, if we're serious about addressing these problems, we need to know how much is coming out of those overflows. And just to quantify what's been going on over the last few years, and I will give the government some credit. So 14,000 monitors have been installed in the last 7 years. Yeah? So that's good news, because it was less than 1,000. It's now 15,000 on the storm overflows have been installed. There's another 7,000 don't have overflows. Yeah? So one and I'm going to jump ahead to number 16. 16 is talking about where those locations are, because you can have overflows at a sewage treatment works, you can have overflows at a pumping station, and you can have overflows on the sewer network. And what I believe everybody in this room would want is we want to capture wherever that overflow is. Yeah, and that's what 16 is trying to do. And I'll just try and quantify some of the numbers on that. So my favourite, Thames Water. So Thames Water right now have got 30 EDMs, event duration monitors, at inlet storm overflows at wastewater treatment works. They've got 183 at storm tanks on wastewater treatment works. They've got 137 at storm discharge overflows at pumping stations. And they've got 320 storm overflows on the sewer network itself, not in a pumping station, not in the treatment works. And what we're trying to do is capture all of those areas, because we need to know what's going on, because if we don't know what's going on, we can't fix it. So, going back to 13, so 13 is the volume of discharge. 14 is just an amendment on that same count, so I'm not going to go into that in any more detail. 15 is relating to reporting on discharge from overflows and adds to the existing stipulations about the form of information it must be published in. I'm going to read it out. It must be uploaded and updated automatically. So let's get rid of human involvement. Yeah, we're in 2025. All this stuff can be automated, and it should be, because at the moment, and Professor Peter Hammond has done some great research. I'm incredibly grateful to the WASP team, Windrush Against Sewage Pollution, which have been one of the drivers of information and campaigning in this space. So well done, Peter, Ash, Vaughan, Jeff, many, many thanks. Peter spotted that basically when Thames Water monitors its sewage, it's doing it at the wrong times of day, so where it's lowest. Yeah? So what we just want to do is automate it so it's doing it all the time. That's less human interaction, lower cost, and much more achievable. And then, as Thames Water has actually been one of the first to put it on in the public domain, a map with all their, whether they're dumping sewage or not in the last 48 hours currently, or not in the last 48 hours, but they don't give the historic information. So we need the historic information in there, and it needs to be downloadable. So any scientist, citizen scientist, can come along and pull this data off and act on it. And without putting in clause 15, we don't have that. So these are just very nuts and boltsy, practical things that we want to be heading along. Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I thank the Honourable Member for giving way. The questions that he is asking around the type of monitors that you have on sewage outlets, I just wondered if he was aware that in the last Parliament, the Environmental Audit Committee looked at this very issue, and their recommendation was actually the approach that is being taken by the Water Special Measures Bill to look at monitors at upstream and downstream, looking at the quality, the water quality, and they regarded that as the best way to assess this issue.
I'm very happy with them upstream and downstream. Thank you for the intervention. That's fine. What I want is them all in. Yeah, so that, and I want them done quicker. So in the last 7 years, 14,000 monitors were in. As per the House of Commons Library Clause 3, what we're being signed up to currently is a much slower installation of monitors. Whether they're EDM or flow meters doesn't matter. So I'm going to read out that. So Clause 3, this is the House of Commons Library. The reporting duty on discharges from emergency overloads would be phased in, with water companies expected to achieve 50% monitoring coverage by the end of the next price review in 2030 and 100% by 2035, the end of the following price review. And I'm just like, why would we go slower? That is slower, a lot slower than what has even been done over the last 7 years. We should be moving much faster. And just the whole, I mean, I guess what kind of I find rather depressing is, I suspect this came out of DEFRA. It's like, why this desire just to slow the whole thing down if possible? It's like, why, we've got a huge problem, why aren't we moving faster to deal with it? And I frankly don't look at the crew opposite, I'm looking at the DEFRA mindset. It's profoundly depressing. So that's that. And then on 16, I'll see if I haven't cut, Yeah, so this is just, again, the same, the aspect as covered in terms of the installation rate. And what we're trying to do there is get the rate of it much faster. Now, we've asked for 12 months. Now, that, and I'm going to try and quantify this. I have a business background. So how much these monitors cost, flow monitors, it matters how much they cost. So flow monitors, 500 to 2,000 quid per unit, yeah? So we've got 15,000, you know, across the country. So we're talking, you know, 85 million quid or whatever it might be. That's if you have 2,000 as the unit cost, so you take the higher level of what the unit cost is, and you say each of them will cost 2,000 to install, which is quite a lot of money. We did it much, much cheaper in West Oxfordshire and Witney. Well done, the Witney Flood Mitigation Group. They got 10 installed for a fraction of that. So it's doable, and let's just talk 84 million. I mean, does that sound like a lot of money? Frankly, it doesn't to me, and I'm going to try and quantify that. So 84 million, that's between 10 or so water companies, yeah? Thames Water alone has got 17 billion of debt, and we're talking about 84 million. Yeah, it's a fractional number, and if we're serious about fixing our problems, we've got to go there. Thank you.
Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers, and it's a great pleasure to rise and move the Amendment 3 in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Beaconsfield. Amendment 3, there's a recurrent theme today, Mr. Vickers, in terms of transparency and clarity. We're wanting cleaner waters, and we're wanting the data collection then to be transparent and available to people so that they can actually monitor and actually analyse. So I think, again, the spirit of this amendment is in the spirit of transparency and clarity. Amendment 3 would, as the text suggests, make it a statutory requirement for water companies to publish the information that they have on discharges from emergency overflows on the homepage of their website. Now, some water companies already go some way to discussing overflows of different kinds, including what they are, why they occur. But this particular amendment from my honourable friend, the member for Beaconsfield, would go further in setting a clearer guideline for how transparent water companies must expect to be in every specific incidence of an emergency overflow that may occur. We of course know that emergency overflows are those particularly when technical faults or blockages in the water system arise that require overflows to help with their resolution, rather than storm overflows whereby the system is overwhelmed by excess surface or groundwater entering the network. The work of the previous Conservative government tackled the issue of storm overflows, unlike any government that had preceded it, including, as I've said, getting 100% of reporting and monitoring of storm overflows that was at 7% back in 2010. This was in addition to fast-tracking £180 million of investment from water companies to prevent 8,000 sewage spills in 2024, and introducing requirements for further investment over 25 years of upwards of £60 billion. But moving forward, Mr. Vickers, however, we need to ensure that emergency overflows are treated with a similar parity and attention. We do not want to see a hypothetical situation arising whereby the problem of storm overflows that have had so much attention in recent years is simply shifted over to emergency overflows, and the issue of technical fault used as an unnecessary justification for emergency overflows to occur. By requiring emergency overflow information to be published on the homepage of each and every water company's website, this risk is potentially then alleviated. While the government may argue that this risk is alleviated by Clause 3 of the bill in and of itself, this particular amendment goes further in its specificity for the publication of data relating to emergency overflows. By requiring the homepage to be used for publication of emergency overflow data, the requirement in Clause 3 that the information be published in a way which makes it readily accessible to the public is given a definition that the bill in its current form lacks. Amendment 3, in other words, provides explicit clarity from the bill and water companies about the requirements for publication of emergency overflow information, without the risk of dispute down the line about whether an individual company has complied or not with the requirements of the Act. On this basis, I would encourage and urge the government to support this amendment, as it clearly does not seek to frustrate the intentions of the government in being stringent on water companies and their duties with emergency overflows. This amendment merely strengthens the existing conditions of Clause 3 in providing, as I've said earlier, further clarity and specificity. We urge the government to consider this measure.
Jerome Mayhew.
I'm very grateful, Mr Vickers, as ever. So I'm going to start, with your permission, to talk about Amendment 13, which is the Liberal Democrat clause seeking to add volume measurers to outflows, to storm outflows. As was, I hope, made clear by my earlier intervention, I'm sympathetic to the objective of this amendment, but I have questions as to whether or not the route that's gone down by the Liberal Democrats is in fact the right one. Because if by legislating them to have another piece of kit, a volume measuring piece of equipment alongside the EDM, yes, it goes some way to solving the problem, but it doesn't actually solve the real problem, which is to say we need to know when a discharge is happening, the volume of the discharge, the level of sewage as opposed to water in that discharge, and the impact, the consequential impact on the watercourse into which it is being discharged. And I was very grateful to the intervention of the Honourable Member for Hastings and Rye, who made reference to the water report of the Environmental Audit Committee, of which I was one of the authors, where we took a lot of evidence on this issue. We had a trip. We went down to Oxfordshire to the River Windrush. We met the leading citizen scientists in this area and took evidence from them both there and also in our more formal evidence sessions in this place. And she is right that the outcome of the combination of evidence that we received was that the most appropriate form of technical solution was a measure of water quality upstream and downstream, and for that water quality measurement to be made public, to be published continuously. And it's for that reason that we have Section 81 of the Environment Act 2021, which requires automatic publishing within 60 minutes of an event happening. And that leads me on to question one of the comments which the Honourable Member for Witney said, and he was referring to Thames Water choosing when to measure. Well, with respect to him, when it comes to Clause 3, which after all is about emergency overflows, it's not about standard monitoring, under the current legislation, Thames Water and any other water undertaker has no option as to when they measure. The EDM is triggered by the emergency event, and they also have no option as to when they can publish, because it has to be within 60 minutes of the event being notified. Yes, of course.
Just to qualify that, obviously the EDM, sorry Chair, thank you. Yes, of course, the EDMs are automatic. I was talking about the spot monitoring by the individuals.
That is, with respect to him, a separate point, because we're talking about the amendment of Clause 3, which is about emergency overflows. So I accept the point, the direction. As with so many of the discussions we've had this morning and this afternoon, we're all trying to get to the right outcome, but this is line-by-line consideration of the draft of this bill, which is rather boring and technical, but this is where we are trying to tease out, Mr Vickers, some of the drafting issues which can be improved. So I'm not sure that the problem that he's seeking to resolve should sit naturally in Clause 3 of the bill. Moving on to Amendment 15. Again, it's just highlighting this point, Mr Vickers, that I fear that this amendment does lead, given that it is in Clause 3 relating to emergency discharge, emergency overflows, that this does lead to a duplication, a legal duplication of Section 81 of the Environment Act. I don't want to do the Minister's job for her, but from my perspective anyway, that would be a reason why we should look carefully at before we accept Clause 15. And when I say I don't want to do the Minister's job for her, that's only pro tem. In the future, I definitely want to do the Minister's job for her. And then finally, no one has yet spoken. The Liberal Democrats have not yet spoken in favour of Amendment 16, so I will leave that until such time as they decide to. But in relation to well, you can come back into it. Well, he can. Finally, in relation to Amendment 17, which the Honourable Member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale... are we going to from this? I'll pause there.
May I rejoin on 16, if that's all right? Since sorry, I thought I had mentioned. So let's just go back on 16. So I'm going to read it out. The undertaker will ensure within 12 months of the passing of this Act, appropriate monitors are installed to collect the information required. And that point is 12 months. Yes, so that's putting people's feet to the fire. But we've got a massive problem. So this is totally doable in terms of timeline. And, you know, if the government was to come back and say, you know, we want 36 months, not 12 months, fine. I've got no problem with that. But what we want to do is, and I was talking about being depressed by the desire to slow things down, and I talked about the House of Commons library data about giving another 10 years to install these monitors. It's like, why are we going slow? You know, we all say to the public that we're really serious about it. Let's be serious. So I thought I covered it, but there I am again.
Thank you. I now do rise to talk about Amendment 16. My primary objection here is the overarching one, which is I'm not convinced this is the right technical approach for the reasons set out in the report of the Environmental Audit Committee and also in the Environment Act of 2021. But if I'm wrong on that, I'm happy to support this amendment as a probing amendment and look forward to the answer that the Minister gives. But if it were to be taken to a vote, then without further information as to the practicality of being able to obtain sufficient tens of thousands of these machines and install them and have them operational and reporting within a 12-month period, I'm not sure that I, as a responsible legislator, could support that without further information that it was a practical option.
Minister.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all honourable members for their thoughts on this set of amendments. And I'd like to also pay tribute to all of the citizen scientists, and many members, in fact, have paid tribute to citizen scientists and the incredible work that they do as volunteers going out there to discover the true state of many of our rivers, lakes and seas. I think we can all agree that it is vital to understand the scale and impact of sewage discharges by ensuring water companies install monitors on emergency overflows as soon as possible, and further by encouraging public access to emergency overflow discharge statement. As the honourable member said, I think there is much of us all trying to get into move in the same direction. But just before I turn to amendments, I think there may be some confusion in the debate today between the different types of monitors and the different types of discharges being discussed here, because there is a big difference between fully treated wastewater being released from wastewater treatment outlets than the discharge of untreated sewage from an emergency or storm overflow. So I'm very happy, Mr Vickers, to share a fact sheet detailing the differences between the different types of emergency overflows and storm overflows to help inform future debates. So turning first to Amendments 13 and 14, tabled by the Honourable Member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, Clause 3 of the bill requires water companies to provide information on the frequency and duration of discharges from emergency overflows in near real time. Combined with the equivalent duty for storm overflows, which has just come into force, this will ensure that all sewage overflows on the network are monitored. This will enable regulators and the public to see in near real time when a discharge from any overflow has occurred and how long it has lasted for. Water companies will use this information to prioritise investment to mitigate the impact of the most polluting overflows as guided by the regulator. However, the type of monitors required to measure volume are much more difficult and costly to install compared with those used to monitor discharge duration. By comparing with the cost of installing flow monitors at wastewater treatment networks, we estimate the cost of installing a flow monitor on all 18,000 storm and emergency overflow sites in England to be up to £6 billion. Network overflows are not set up for flow monitors to be installed. This means the majority of overflow would require complex works such as pipe work modifications in order for monitors to be able to record volume accurately. I will. I'll just finish sort of on this point and then I'm very happy to. We do not think this added cost is proportionate to the additional volume information would provide, especially given that volume information alone does not provide a comprehensive account of the impact of a discharge. For example, you could have a very small volume of very concentrated foul water entering our rivers, which would be very damaging, or a large volume of dilute rainwater overflow. Volume cannot give an accurate assessment of impact. Measurement of water quality, as my honourable friends have said, measurement of water quality is required. I'll pause on that point if the...
Charlie Maynard.
Did you want to...
Yes, thank you. Would the Minister be willing to give information on that 6 billion breakdown? That would be very helpful. And also, it's like, well, I think we're all in agreement. Of course we want to know the quality. So, you know, to my honourable gentleman here, it's like, well, if that's the case, surely the plan is go there. You know, by all means have flow meters with the quality installed, rather than not going there, which I think the Minister was proposing, not putting in flow meters and not putting any quality meters in either. Because, or are you planning on putting in flow and quality meters, and if so, when and how? Please, thank you.
But very happy to give a breakdown of that, of the numbers that we've worked out, of course. And just to reiterate the point I just made before the information, this is why we believe, the government believes, that it's the measurement of water quality that is required. Water companies have been instructed to begin installing continuous water quality monitors for storm overflows and wastewater treatment works from April 2025 onwards. So they have been told to put in these water quality monitors from April 2025. This will provide further information on the impact of sewage discharges on water quality. On this basis, I hope that the honourable members see that this amendment is not needed and feels able to withdraw it. Turning next, yes?
Charlie Maynard.
So to that point, you said from 2025. Great. Over what timeline? Is that the House of Commons Library 10 years, or is that another timeline?
Happy to, I'll make sure I'm not giving him inaccurate information, so I'll find out the answer to his question and I can return to it if that's okay, because I don't want to give you the wrong information. Turning next to Amendment 3 and Amendment 15, but I think, sorry, just to go back to the point, I think the main point we're making is that it's not the volume that is having the impact, it's the toxicity that is having the impact. And we think that by focusing on measuring water quality, we could accurately see the damage that is being done to our environment by what is being discharged. And I think that's the point. If you were choosing where to put the monitors, we think focusing on water quality and how damaging it is more important than focusing on how much there is for them.
Will the Minister give way on that point?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the Minister for giving way. We talk about citizen scientists and the hard work they have to go to sort of uncover what's going on within the data. Now, we're talking about putting lots of different monitors on lots of infrastructure all up and down the country, which is going to spew out lots of different information, which is going to be quite hard to dig into. Would the Minister give a view on if there's going to be a sort of approach to standardisation of data for it to be easier to view for people?
Thank you for his intervention. I think he's sort of preempting my responses to the next amendments around transparency, which I am just about to turn to. And just to sort of reiterate the point, just before we move on from volume, just to re-emphasise the point that, and this is something I looked at seriously, because a number of colleagues have spoken to me about it, so I really don't want you to feel like this is being dismissed out of hand. I did look at this seriously. And one of the other points that was made to me was because lots of the pipes are of different sizes. So if you're going to be able to calculate the volume, you have to be able to calculate the size of the pipe, and you'd have to maybe standardise the size of all pipes to work out the volume that's coming through it at the time, so you can measure how much is coming out of a pipe at one moment. And I think this is where we get to the £6 billion figure, because it's not just the cost of putting the monitors on, it's the cost of ensuring that if you're measuring the amount of sewage flowing past something, then you need to be able to understand the size of it all. I can see you're looking at me with a I've got work to do to convince you of this, but I'll make sure you get the same. I'm probably doing complete disjustice to the person who explained it all to me, but I'll make sure that you get a proper explanation. I think the upshot of the conversation was this is going to be really expensive, and I think what we all want to know is how damaging is what's coming out of those pipes to our environment, and that's why we're focusing on water quality. So sorry about that. And I have had inspiration from over here. So the answer to the question, when will continuous water quality monitoring be rolled out? They've requested to begin installing continuous water quality monitors at 25% of storm overflows and sewage treatment works outlets in price review 24. The sites selected for the first stage of rollout have been prioritised to include sensitive sites such as chalk streams. Turning...
I don't want to steal the thunder for the Honourable Member for Whitney, but he does have a good point, doesn't he, on the speed of rollout of installation of water quality monitors. The 24 price period is for 5 years, is it not? So what that suggests is that there will be an installation of 25% of the monitoring areas over a 5-year period. If I'm wrong on that, I'd be very grateful if the Minister could correct me. What I'm really interested in is how quickly the full network will be installed by and what is preventing it from happening faster.
I feel like we're comparing apples and pears here. Just to sort of reiterate, the point that I was making in regards to water, around the 25% in the next price review was around water quality monitors. I think where the Honourable Gentleman was talking to was the monitoring on all of the other emergency overflows, where he was referring to the data around the speed in which they were being installed. So I think we might be on two...
Would she let me?
Yes, go for it.
She may well be right, but I think it is important that we get to the bottom of this. From my perspective, the important data is the upstream and downstream of a discharge pipe, water quality monitors being installed and activated. I'd be very grateful if the Minister could set out, either because she knows it off the top of her head, or with her officials over the course of the next hour and a quarter, the time frame for those installations and the reasons why it's not happening faster.
I think he's probably moving into Amendment 16, which was the point that the Honourable Gentleman was making around the speed in which these were being rolled out, whereas we were just discussing Amendment 13 and 14. I think this is where there's been a little bit of confusion in this conversation. So I will address the points around speed, however, as part of Amendment 16, if that's okay. Because I was going to turn next to Amendment 3 and 15, but it's all to come. It's all to come. Right, so where were we? Turning next to Amendments 3 and 15, tabled by the Honourable Member for Beaconsfield and the Honourable Member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, respectively. Clause 3 already requires companies to publish information on discharges in a readily accessible and understandable format. This includes information on the occurrence, location and start time of the discharges, which must be published within an hour of the discharge starting. To meet this requirement, water companies will install monitors that have telemetry technology to communicate discharges as they occur. I mean, agreeing with the point the Honourable Gentleman made, you can't falsify this information. It's not based on someone coming. It's an automatic communication. These requirements are the same as those for publishing storm overflow discharges, which is now a statutory duty enforced by Ofwat. Water companies have already published individual maps for their regions to show storm overflows discharges in near real time. In addition, Water UK launched a national storm overflow hub in November last year to centralise all discharge information from water companies onto a single national map. We expect that a similar approach will be taken for emergency overflows. If further direction to companies is needed on how to approach this duty, this can be more appropriately addressed through guidance. Furthermore, validated historic information on discharges from emergency overflows will be available through annual returns published by the Environment Agency. These will allow for long-term trends in annual data to be analysed. And if I may add, are there any specific sort of requests from groups or organised out there about how they would like to see information, then of course they're very welcome to communicate that with me. But as such, the proposed amendments... Okay.
We're here for another week or so. If this information is already in DEFRA's hands about, because I take your point about apples and pears, and maybe we are talking about, would it be helpful if DEFRA could move fast enough, I don't know whether that's possible or not, just to have a little grid circulated to the committee members about storm, emergency, installation periods, whether that's quality, flow, EDM, you name it, just so we're talking, you know, we've got that data and we can talk about it decently and honestly. Thank you.
I think that might be really helpful, because I think that it's been an interesting but a slightly muddled conversation. I think we were going to produce a fact sheet to explain the difference between emergency and storm, and maybe we can include some, as much as we can, some information for you all. If not, I'm hoping by the end of committee, but if not, definitely before report. If I can make that as a not putting too much on my hard-working officials. Turning last to, it's going back to the annual data being analysed. As such, the proposed amendments are unnecessary, and therefore I ask the honourable members to withdraw their amendments. Turning last to Amendment 16, also tabled by the honourable member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale. Okay, so this is on the speed of delivery. The need to deliver the installation of monitors on emergency overflows needs to be balanced with practical constraints and with due consideration for the cost of rolling out so many monitors, especially as those costs are ultimately passed to consumers through water bills. As such, water companies have been instructed to install monitors at 50% of emergency overflows by 2030. This represents a doubling of the previous Conservative government's target of 25% of emergency overflows monitored by 2030. The Environment Agency will agree with water companies which emergency overflows will have monitors installed over the next 5 years based on priority areas, such as those that impact designated bathing and shellfish waters. As set out in the impact assessment for the bill, we expect the rollout of monitors at emergency overflows to cost £533 million over a 10-year period. We believe this pace of rollout strikes the right balance of recognising the urgency, which is this government is doing double to what the previous government promised, but whilst ensuring that companies have the capacity to progress other improvements and balancing customer bill impact. To speak quite frankly, Mr. Chair, I think we also think it's very important to monitor, but it's very important also to fix the causes of some of the problems that we are seeing. And there's always a balance between monitoring the problem and fixing the problem. And we believe that we've got that balance right. Requiring a faster rollout of monitors could undermine the delivery of other improvements water companies must make in price review 24. I wouldn't want Mr. Vickers to be in a situation at the end of this price review where we monitor everything and fix nothing. This includes upgrades to wastewater treatment works and sewage networks to reduce sewage discharge from storm overflows. Where companies can move further and faster to achieve the rollout of monitors at emergency overflows, of course they will be encouraged to do so. But as such, we cannot accept this amendment to require water companies to install all monitors within 12 months, and I therefore ask the honourable member to withdraw it.
Tim Farrell.
Thank you, Chair. Very brief word from me. Grateful to my honourable friend for the detailed points that he has made and for the Minister's replies to them. We will not seek to push the majority of these amendments to the vote. Nevertheless, we do stand by all that we have said on it. But Amendment 13 we would wish to push to a vote. The reality is that duration monitors only do so much good. Asking for volume to be added to duration is not to the exclusion of quality. In fact, it is part of an attempt to try to get to the bottom of it. Just again, off the top of my head, earlier last year, there was a sewage overflow into Coniston Water from the 22nd of August, which lasted just over a week, and a sewage overflow around Easter time in Windermere, which lasted a matter of hours. And yet, the former was more of a trickle, unacceptable. The latter was a deluge, and the difference in terms of quality was significant as well as in terms of volume. And so we would ask that the committee considers 13 and we seek to push that to a vote.
Amendment 13 proposed to clause 3 as on the amendment paper. The question is the amendment be made. Does many of that opinion say aye? Aye. To the contrary, no? No. No. Division? Lock the doors.
Dan Aldridge. No. Helena Dollymore.
No.
Tim Farron. Catherine Fuchs.
No.
Amanda Hack.
No.
Emma Hardy.
No.
Tom Hayes. No. Claire Hazelgrove.
No.
Dr. Neil Hudson.
No vote.
Jane Kirkham.
No.
Jerome Mayhew.
No vote.
Charlie Maynard.
Aye.
Darren Paffey. No. Andrew Pakes.
No.
David Reed.
No vote.
Jeff Smith.
No.
The ayes were 2 and the noes were 11, so the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock. Right, we now move on to Amendment 17 to Clause 3, and I call Tim Farron to move Amendment 17.
I've said the words probably the wrong time in favour of Amendment 17, but I move it, but I don't seek to push it to a vote.
Is everyone content for the amendment to be withdrawn?
Aye.
Amendment by leave withdrawn. We now come on to Amendment 4 to Clause 3, and I call Dr. Neil Hudson to move Amendment 4.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. In my remarks regarding Amendment 3, I highlighted the fact that parity of attention between storm overflows and emergency flows is critical to action in regulating the water industry. With this point in mind, I beg leave to move Amendment 4 in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Beaconsfield. This amendment makes it a criminal offence for water companies and their chief executives for failure to comply with their duty to report on discharges from emergency overflows. As I stated earlier, much has been done to tackle the issue of storm overflows by the previous Conservative government, which included the passing of the Environment Act, which we've spoken a lot about today, the Environment Act 2021, to introduce the statutory duty for water companies to publish storm overflow data in England every year, and a storm overflow discharge reduction plan that created strict targets for sewage pollution and demanded water company investment in the necessary infrastructure to resolve issues. Amendment 4, in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Beaconsfield, addresses a need to ensure that emergency overflows are subject to the strict enforcement that we have seen exercised towards storm overflows in recent years. We have seen that an emphasis on strict enforcement can work in getting the reform that we across the House want to see the industry practice, and indeed to improve water quality. And I do note, and I welcome the comments from the honourable member for Witney welcoming the progress that we have made in that area in terms of monitoring and trying to address this. The government has set out in the bill plans to put in place a criminal offence for failing to cooperate with or obstruct regulatory investigations. This particular amendment addresses a gap in those plans in a key area of public concern, a duty to report discharges from emergency overflows. Despite these significant steps, some water companies are not taking their responsibilities to protect our waterways seriously enough. This is a sector where the rewards for success have historically been high for shareholders and, very much as we have heard a lot about, for executives. It is time now for serious consequences for failure to protect our waterways and the public to sit alongside those rewards for success. The duty to report discharges from emergency overflows is basic, reasonable and vital to public transparency. And again, I come back to our points about transparency today. There can be no defence from any water company that it does not understand that duty or why that duty matters. Given this particular bill already puts in place the principle of a criminal offence for failure to fulfil a reasonable duty, it establishes a criminal offence for failure to cooperate or obstruct a regulatory investigation. This amendment strengthens the bill's intent that water companies' conduct must be subject to criminal sanction and unlimited fines. Of course, at the same time, however, as human error and technical fault can plague many walks of life, and water companies are no exception in this, there must be a fair and reasonable opportunity for water companies and chief executives accused of violating their duties to show that they have genuinely tried to comply with the duties of reporting emergency overflows. Subsection 2 of Amendment 4 therefore provides explicit criteria that failure to meet the duties of publication for storm overflows does not result in a criminal offence when the company has done all they reasonably could to prevent their incident from occurring. But overall, and members are going to wince, I'm going to come up with some dental analogies here, but by giving teeth to the statutory duty of water companies to publish emergency overflow data with the threat of prosecution for failure to do so, the message is sent beyond doubt that water companies must comply with the requirements that are being put upon them by this particular bill. It is by giving teeth to regulation on water pollution that we have seen progress made on the issue of water pollution in the last few years. We accept more needs to be done, but I hope members across the House will acknowledge, as some have already started to do today, that progress has been made, and we want to work together collectively to make sure that the teeth that have been given are sharp enough, big enough, enough of them in place to do the work that we want them to do. So what we have done in the previous government, such as giving stronger powers of enforcement to Ofwat and the Environment Agency, including removing limits in the amount that water companies could be fined for violating water pollution laws, and creating new powers that ban big bonuses and payouts to chief executives of water companies that have failed to do the right thing. We also drove through an increase in the number of inspections water companies can expect to see, from 4,000 a year by April this year to 10,000 a year by April of next year, introducing a criminal offence for violation of emergency overflow reporting duties, therefore enables us to expand exactly upon that approach that creates positive change in water quality. I commend this amendment to the government and the committee.
The Amendment 4 proposed to Clause 3 as on the amendment paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Minister.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Beaconsfield for tabling Amendment 4, which looks to make a failure to publish discharge data from emergency overflows in near real time a criminal offence. I wholeheartedly agree that it is vital that regulators have a clear route to ensure that water companies comply with this duty. However, Clause 3 already ensures that this duty is enforceable by Ofwat under Section 18 of the Water Industry Act 1991. Section 18 provides a range of tools, including significant fines, for Ofwat to bring companies into compliance. Changing this to a criminal offence may slow down enforcement, as criminal prosecution is typically slower than enforcement via Section 18. We also do not believe in this case that it would be proportionate to create direct criminal liability for the chief executive, particularly with a potential sanction of imprisonment, because the large number of emergency overflows operated by companies, each operating with a different situational context, mean it is unreasonable to hold a single person to account for full compliance with this duty. By making changes such as introducing bonus bans and provisions to support prosecuting executives for obstructing the regulator, this bill already strengthens provisions to hold executives to account for wrongdoing. For these reasons, the proposed amendment is unnecessary, and I therefore ask the Honourable Member to withdraw it.
Dr Hudson.
I thank the Minister for her comments. I can confirm that we will not be pushing this amendment to a vote.
Is everyone content for the amendment to be withdrawn? Aye. Amendment by leave withdrawn. We now come on to Amendment 10 to Clause 3. I call Dr Hudson to move Amendment 10.
Thank you, Mr Vickers. I'll try not to mention teeth in this section, but I can't promise it. It is great pleasure that I move to speak in favour of Amendment 10. To table Amendment 10 on behalf of my honourable friend, the member for Beaconsfield. It's sounding like Groundhog Day, isn't it? This amendment, Amendment 10, has a simple principle that waters used for aquatic sports should be subject to the same protections as those for bathing. It establishes that there should be clear consequences for water companies and their chief executives where they fail to comply with a clear duty to protect the waters in which people practice aquatic sports. Aquatic sports are an important part of our sporting heritage in this country, but the impact of overflow discharges into our waterways, into our rivers, is creating potentially an existential risk to some sports clubs up and down the country. We've heard reports and the increased incidence of illness of participants, indirectly and directly as a consequence from exposure to pathogens, bacteria from sewage outflows in the waterways that they are practicing their water sports. And it's a significant cause for concern for our rowing, sailing, canoeing and other aquatic sports clubs. Many clubs take their duty of care very, very seriously indeed, are having to put in place their own monitoring systems to protect their participating members. Training sessions, competitions and regattas are all facing potential cancellation, and participation in these sports risks becoming less attractive and less available to people. And I think we all would be in agreement that actually actively participating in sport and physical exercise is so good for our physical health, but also our mental health as well. So I think if we have deterrents that are discouraging people from being involved in some of these sports, then that is very deeply regrettable. So this amendment is trying to put the safety, the waters used for aquatic sports, on the same basis of those in which people bathe. It's time for water companies to take responsibility for ensuring that those waters are safe to use. The amendment sets out a reasonable expectation that a water company must not discharge from an emergency overflow in an area within a 1 mile radius of an area used for aquatic sports. The definition of such an area is clearly outlined and further discretion provided for the Secretary of State to determine such areas where potentially needed. The consequences for water companies and their chief executives for failure to comply with this duty are set out clearly and are consistent with the other amendment in the name of my friend, my honourable friend, the member for Beaconsfield. Thank you, Mr Vickers.
Amendment 10 proposed clause 3 as on the amendment paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Minister.
Thank you. I thank the Honourable Member for Beaconsfield for proposing Amendment 10, which looks to make it an offence for sewage undertakers to use an emergency overflow in areas used for aquatic sport. And I'd like to also mention, Mr Vickers, how much I enjoyed meeting the Water Sports Alliance just last week to hear about the fantastic their work in getting us all up, out and active. Though I've yet so far resisted the temptation to don a wetsuit and join them. And I agree that it is vital that we reduce the impact of sewage pollution so our children and their children can make the memories we did enjoying our waterways. However, we do not believe this amendment to be necessary. It risks duplicating existing requirements to limit pollution from emergency overflows, as well as protections for bathers that are already in place. Emergency overflows are only permitted to discharge in very strict circumstances and as a last resort, such as in the event of mechanical breakdown or a downstream blockage. And I wonder again, that fact sheet and the different ones might help here. Should an emergency overflow discharge occur outside of permit conditions, the Environment Agency is able to take robust enforcement action, including fines and criminal prosecution. The measures in this bill will include transparency around emergency overflow discharges, shining a light on where they shouldn't be happening. This will support... Yes?
Tim Farrell.
I just want to point out something probably bluntly obvious, because I want to support the Honourable of Epping Forest and indeed his friend from Beaconsfield. When emergency overflows happen in rivers near places where people may engage in aquatic sports, that is one thing and it's unacceptable. When it happens in lakes, it's worth bearing in mind, so I will just pick Windermere for an example. A drop of water that enters Windermere at the north end of the lake takes 9 months to pass through to the River Leven to go out into Morecambe Bay. And so the consequences of an overflow in one of the lakes, the Lake District or elsewhere, is so much greater than in other waterways. And that's what, and it's also a place, 30 outdoor education centres or what have you in my constituency, many of them are on lakes. They are much more affected by this than any other form of spillage, which is why I think this amendment is worth pursuing, I think.
Thank you, and I thank the honourable gentleman. And as I say, I wholeheartedly agree with the intention behind what we're trying to do here. Though I do just want to briefly note that later on in this debate, in the next few days, we're going to be discussing the importance of chalk streams as well. And this would create a hierarchy between what is important and what isn't. My argument is emergency overflows are a problem wherever they are, and they shouldn't be happening and shouldn't be used unless it is, as it says here, an absolute emergency. And the measures in this bill will increase transparency around emergency overflow discharge and shining a light on where they are happening. While emergency overflow discharge should only occur very rarely, I mean, they should do what it says on the tin, that it should be an emergency, it is not possible to eliminate them altogether because they are important safety valves to protect businesses and homes in time of emergency. Removing or blocking emergency overflow outlets could lead to excess effluent wastewater being released elsewhere, including through manholes. This would have significant safety implications. We also have significant protections in place for designated bathing waters, both inland and on the coast. The government consults on and designates our bathing waters, and the Environment Agency monitor these to ensure that bathers' health is protected and to assess what action is needed to improve water quality. Once designated, water companies are required to investigate and improve bathing water sites. These include upgrades and improvements to overflows where needed. As part of the storm overflows, which is obviously different to the emergency ones, discharge reduction plan by 2035, water companies will have improved all storm overflows discharging near every designated bathing water. We have also recently consulted on reforms to the Bathing Water Regulations 2013, including expanding the definition of bathers to include other water users. A government response to the consultation will be issued in due course, and if reforms are taken forward in the future, this could mean that more bathing sites, including those used by aquatic sport users, will be subject to improvements. As such, we do not believe that the proposed amendment is required, and I therefore ask the honourable member to withdraw it.
Dr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr Vickers, and I thank the Minister for her comments on this and acknowledging the importance of the safety of the waters that people practice the water sports, and to the Honourable Member for Westminster and Lonsdale for supporting that concept as well, that we need to try and keep these waters safe. But I happily can confirm that we will not be pushing this particular amendment to a vote, Mr Vickers.
Thank you. Is everyone content for the amendment to be withdrawn? Aye. Amendment by leave withdrawn. We now come to the question that Clause 3 stand part of the bill with which it would be convenient to debate new Clause 25. The question is that Clause 3 stand part of the bill. Yep. Do I call the Minister? Yes. Minister. To move.
We're all learning today. We're doing very well. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on the importance of Clause 3. Monitoring and reporting on discharges from sewage outlets provides important transparency around the frequency and duration of sewage discharges to support enforcement action and policy development, and to direct investment to reduce discharges. English water companies have installed monitors at 100% of storm overflows. Near real-time information on storm overflow discharges in England is available on company websites and the National Storm Overflow Hub, which provides a national map of all storm overflows. However, emergency overflows are not currently fully monitored, and data from emergency overflows is not published in near real time. There are 7,000 emergency overflows in England, and it is vital that we better understand the frequency and duration of these discharges so that action can be taken to reduce the harm that they cause the environment. This clause will close the monitoring gap across sewage outlets by requiring that discharges from emergency overflows be published within an hour. The near real-time information on discharges from emergency overflows will be independently scrutinised by the regulators, making it easier and quicker to investigate and punish wrongdoing. This information must also be published in a format that is both accessible and understandable to the public. And just to mention again, if there are any specific requirements that people think in terms of this information, then of course we can pass that to the Environment Agency. To support implementation of this measure, we have instructed English water companies to install monitors at 50% of emergency overflows by 2030 and 100% of emergency overflows by 2035. During implementation of this measure, monitors will also be independently certified to ensure they are correctly installed and maintained at emergency overflows. I hope that the committee agrees that this duty is essential to meet our manifesto commitment of ensuring independent monitoring of every sewage outlet, and I move that this clause stand part of the bill.
The question is that...
Or should I cover... Sorry, Chair.
Sorry.
Can I just ask, should I cover the comments on new clause 25 now?
Yeah.
Or...
Yes.
Now, right. Excellent. Turning now to new clause 25, tabled by the Honourable Member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale. We agree that it is vital to understand the scale and impact of sewage discharges. This is why clause 3 requires water companies to provide information on the frequency and duration of discharges from emergency overflows in mealtime. And I look forward to hearing what the Honourable Member has to say on the matter, and will respond to the amendment and provide reassurances in detail in my closing speech.
Charlie Maynard.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep it short. So I'm looking forward to the fact sheet and the 6 billion and going through that. What you'll note in the amendment is we're focusing here on overflows, not emergency, not storm, but just because, frankly, if you're a bug, a bunny or a bather, it doesn't make much difference whether you get whacked by an emergency overflow or a storm overflow, you're still getting whacked by the sewage. And so just trying to start to unify and get this all into one table would be really helpful, so thank you for that. The next point, I guess, is look, we've already lost one amendment about flow, so I recognise that. I'm not going to go on, but it is important. This thing about quality and flow. I'm afraid I find the government's position about, well, we really need to focus on quality, therefore let's not talk about flow, and let's not install flow meters. I find that spurious, and I don't say that. I don't mean that with offence. I just mean it. It feels like a real letdown. That we're not going there now, and I don't really see any reason why we can't, and I think you are being flim-flammed by the numbers about 6 billion, respectfully. So that's that. The other point I'll bring out is, on this we talk about sewage treatment works, pumping stations and so on. I've said that already, but I really want to push that point home, because what we want to be doing is capturing every overflow wherever it is, and too often people are talking about works, but forgetting pumping stations, forgetting the overflows on the network itself. So as we put legislation, we've got a water commission, etc., really look forward to seeing that in there and that being the coverage. So overflows and works, pumping stations, network. And we're not going to push this one to a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. And so keen was I to support this clause that I went too early. So I appreciate your forbearance, Chair. I mean, this clause has my absolute full support. As I mentioned, I live in an area served by Southern Water, and the citizen scientists on the River Itchen have done such good work that they show on a regular and consistent basis that there are unacceptably high levels of faecal matter in the river, even when there has been no storm and even when there has been no emergency. So the fleshing out of the requirement for monitoring is hugely welcome, so that we can have that greater accountability. And furthermore, this is entirely relevant to New Clause 25, because actually this is an area where there are aquatic sports going on. We have, particularly during the pandemic, a great wild swimming group that use the river. There are paddleboarders, there are canoeists, there are kayakers, many of whom I have the greatest respect for, because they go where I'm not quite willing to go at the moment because of the levels of illness that people have reported. This is also an area where the stench of what goes into the river affects local school children who can't play outside. So there are all kinds of reasons why this clause will deal with the issues that are being experienced in my constituency. We want to see bathing water status in that area. That is almost an impossibility at the moment because of the quality of the water. Again, Clause 3, as it stands, will guarantee that openness, the monitoring, the forcing of accountability in this area. So I do welcome this clause. I thank the Minister for bringing it forward. That this bill takes action and really makes achieving that status much more likely, which I know people in my constituency and beyond across not only Southern Waters area but across the country will welcome too. I will gladly give way.
Thank you, Chair. Does the honourable member share my horror at the current situation that we have, where we have constituents who are getting ear and eye infections from swimming in the sea or in rivers, and one constituent of mine even attributes their deafness in one ear to an infection that they got in the sea? So does he agree with me this bill is so desperately needed for our constituents?
I thank my honourable friend for her intervention, and of course share her shock and disgust at not only what people are suffering but the reasons why, the entirely avoidable reasons why people are becoming ill. There are so many benefits to what can be achieved through this clause and through the wider bill, not just about the issues that members on all sides of the House have mentioned in terms of trust in our water companies and the use of public money, but also public health. How much more could people across all of our constituencies be experiencing in terms of public health if they were able to engage with the aquatic sports, with just enjoying the park areas that surround so many of our rivers, beaches and waterways as well. So I entirely agree with her, and that I'm grateful that that adds even more weight to why this is an absolutely necessary clause as it stands. Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, and I thank all of my members for their contributions during the debate on Clause 3. To reiterate my promise to provide that fact sheet and the information around the numbers that we've used, we've had an interesting debate of the different types of monitors, but just to clarify, we have emergency overflows, storm overflows, water quality monitors, event duration monitors, and obviously volume monitors that have been discussed in this debate. So we'll make sure that that sheet clarifies exactly so we're all on the same page and understanding the debate clearly. But I think ultimately, putting all that to one side, I think what we all agree on is we all want, and we all think it's important, to better understand the frequency and duration of discharges from all of these emergency overflows. And we all think that we need to improve transparency and to inform investigations by the regulators into potential non-compliance. So combined with the equivalent duty for storm overflows, which has just come into force, Clause 3 will ensure all sewage overflows on the network are monitored. This will enable regulators and, importantly, the public to see in near real time when a discharge from any overflow has occurred and how long it has lasted for. Water companies will use this information to prioritise investment to mitigate the impact of the most polluting overflows as guided by the regulators. And of course, we've already discussed concerns we have around volume monitors being more difficult and costly to install, and the concerns around my rather garbled explanation of the difficulty because of the pipe work and the majority of overflows requiring modification. And as I said, I will provide the further information on those numbers. Such a large programme of work would take much longer than 12 months. We do not think this added cost is proportionate to the additional value that volume information would provide, especially given that volume information alone does not provide a comprehensive account of the impact of a discharge. For this, the measurement of the water quality is required. And to repeat the point I've made, Mr Vickers, I do not want to be minister in a few years' time that has perfected the art of monitoring and done nothing to deal with the causes. This is why the water companies will begin installing continuous water quality monitors for storm overflows in Price Review 24 to provide further information of the impact of sewage discharges on water quality. New Clause 25, tabled by the Honourable Member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, would also require capacities for each sewage treatment works and pumping station. This is unnecessary because this information is already included in environmental permits and available on the Environment Agency's public register. This amendment also proposes a general duty for water companies to collect data relating to their performance operating a sewage system. We do not believe this broad duty adds any meaningful requirement on water companies beyond their existing duties and through the environmental information regulations. On this basis, I beg to move that Clause 3 stands part of the bill and that the Honourable Member is content to withdraw his amendment.
The question is that clause 3 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come on to Amendment 26 to Clause 4, with which it would be convenient to debate Clause 4 stand part and new Clause 5. I call Tim Farron to move Amendment 26.
Thank you, Chair. I will not say very much about this. You'll be delighted to hear, not least because many of the points that I've made is relating to nature-based solutions when we're looking at these broader issues. These were covered under Amendment 24, many of the arguments I've made I've already said. So I just simply want to point out that the value of nature-based solutions also include the fact that they are cheap. That they are low input, they provide potential income for farmers and other land managers, they are environmentally friendly in and of themselves, they involve very, very, very light engineering in order to install and to maintain, they are less complex, they are not labour intensive, and indeed they are very much quicker to achieve and to install, as well as having very clear ecological benefits, as well as alleviating pressure on more conventional forms of sewage treatment. So I'd make those points just to add to the importance of prioritising nature-based solutions when it comes to tackling sewage treatment, and I will just simply leave it there.
Amendment 26 proposed clause 4 as on the amendment paper. The question is that the amendment be made. Jerome Mayhew.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vickers. I'm rising. I understand that this isn't going to be put to a vote, but I do want to add my support for nature-based solutions and to draw to the Minister's attention an experience that I had. This is with Anglian Water, where they had a village-sized water treatment works just over the border in North Norfolk at a place called Langham, and the chalk stream through that the sewage works discharge into is the Stiffkey, which runs through my constituency and then just over the border. To their great credit, Anglian Water had cooperated with a local landowner and created a wetland. So you would have thought it would be the easiest thing in the world to have the sewage discharge, the treated sewage, discharged then into a secondary processing unit, which was, from memory, about 2 acres in size, quite a large wetland with meandering going through it, and then an exit back into the Stiffkey. This eventually was allowed to take place by the Environment Agency, but it is worth highlighting that their initial response was no, you have to apply for a license to discharge, a new license to discharge effluent into the river, because it's coming not from the pipe, which was semi-treated, but coming from a new entrance into the stream via the wetland. And this computer said no attitude of the Environment Agency was quite extraordinary, because it's not going to get any worse having been through a wetland, the discharge water going through a wetland before entering the stream. And yet it took several months. I'm not going to say how many because I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a very significant constraint, and it called into question whether or not this project was going to go ahead at all. So I'd be grateful if the Minister could take that away with her and make sure that the Environment Agency sees the development of wetlands as being a really positive step forward, as I know their senior leadership does, but that message should go right through the organisation so that the time and delay of bureaucracy and the requirement for new applications for licences doesn't get in the way of what we all wish to achieve.
Neil. Dr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I rise in this section to speak about new clause 5 tabled in the name of His Majesty's loyal opposition. We can do new.
Oh, sorry.
New clause 5.
Yeah, it's in that top row. Yeah. So we're talking about practical nature-based solutions to flood risk. Can I welcome the comments that have been made about nature-based solutions, not least from the Honourable Member from Westmoreland and Lonsdale, who talks, passionately about the importance of nature-based solutions in terms of flood mitigation and that side of things. As he has talked about passionately, I noted that during the general election campaign, he waxes lyrical about Windermere, which is in a beautiful part of his constituency, and I know that he was an active participant with the leader of his party in water sports as well. And I just note that he was a lot more competent in staying on the paddleboard than his leader. But I do very much acknowledge
Anti-pollution, this guy.
I do welcome his comments on the importance of protecting and preserving our water spaces, but very much encouraging landowners, land managers and farmers in terms of the government facilitating them to do nature-based solutions to mitigate flood issues. So the amendment, new clause 5, tries to ensure that water companies are considering practical nature-based solutions to flood risk. This will also make water companies try to improve water quality and improve nature restoration in their particular catchment areas as well. So there's a double win there. In government, we Conservatives set specific legally binding targets to improve water quality and availability, to try to reduce nutrient pollution and to reduce sediment pollution from agriculture to the water environment. And we also set out how to reduce water pollution in our environmental improvement plan. Yeah. Nature recovery was carried out under us, and opportunities to carry it out with nature-based solutions should very much be seized upon as we move forward. I do very much want to be fair to the government and welcome the movement they have made on this particular issue throughout the passage of this particular bill, the Water Special Measures Bill, in the other place. And I thank the Minister for her engagement with this, but also Baroness Hayman as well, for the really collegiate way that she worked with colleagues to try and I think we do have a spirit of consensus when we talk about the importance of nature and nature recovery and using nature-based methods to try and help these situations. So I welcome the approach of the government in the other place, which has led to having us measures in clause 4, which we are now discussing. This has been, I welcome very much to my Conservative colleagues the work that they've done in the other place, and I would like to name check particularly Lord Gascoigne. However, we again believe that despite the movement that the government has made, there still is room for further movement and further improvement, and I would hope that the Minister may consider some of these. That the government can really make to ensure that we can benefit from the power of nature-based solutions to the problems relating to water. Everyone in this room will be acutely aware that flooding is becoming a much more regular phenomenon across the United Kingdom, and I see members opposite nodding their heads that we all have experiences of representing constituencies where flooding is becoming increasingly apparent with extreme weather events, the impact of climate change. And at this point in time, I would just like to because we had a recent statement on Monday from the Minister and we talked about the issues that are being faced. I want to reiterate my sympathy to those who have been affected by flooding. And again, as I said on Monday in the Chamber in exchanges with the Minister, and I think a bit of repetition is not bad in this particular subject, we must not underestimate the mental health impacts of flooding. And I want to pay tribute to those people in the front line, in the emergency services, the Environment Agency, local authorities, and volunteers who do so much to help people in these challenging times. And not least, as the Minister and I exchanged in the Chamber just this week with regard to the flooding and extreme weather that we've seen in recent days and weeks. Sadly, I think we're going to be having these exchanges on and on. But this is where constructive measures to try and actually see what we can do to mitigate the impacts of flooding is something, and using nature to help with that is something that I think we can agree on. It is in flooding that something like nature-based solutions can have, Mr. Vickers, a significant impact, such as the recreation of bends in rivers, re-wriggling rivers, and creation of wetlands that slow the flow of water. While not the specific purpose of the amendment, I would quickly like to suggest that the government look at the issue of supporting farmers financially who implement nature-based solutions such as these. This was introduced through the Environmental Land Management Scheme, and I think if the government can take that forward to actually acknowledge farmers and land managers and landowners that are actually doing the right thing to try and help their local communities and also restoring nature in the process as well. But something I must ask the government to clarify is their formal position on nature-based solutions. And I see lots of nodding of heads, and it would be great to get clarity from the Minister. So if they are not content with this particular amendment that His Majesty's opposition are tabling, why do they not believe that this complements Clause 4 in some way. So we would like to hear from the Minister what they feel about this particular amendment, because we believe that it complements Clause 4, and that is why we've chosen to table it. At present, Clause 4 mandates that nature-based solutions be considered in drainage and sewage systems and their drainage and management plans. Our amendment, however, strengthens this by directly connecting the need for nature-based solutions to the very conditions of holding water licences. This is an important distinction, as it follows a process of reform that has led to the improved position that we have seen in the sector in recent years. We all agree more needs to be done, and there are still drastic things happening, but we hopefully are acknowledging that some progress is being made, but we need to hold water companies' feet to the fire in terms of making more progress. But such as licensing rule changes around the paying of dividends to shareholders that we've already discussed in this committee stage today. Further still, we have widened the scope of which nature-based solutions must be considered to include flood risk, which, as I've already mentioned, can be vastly improved upon and has been mentioned by the member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale in terms of it can be improved upon by using nature-based solutions. Even more so, subsection 2 explicitly states that Ofwat cannot take any steps that discourage any water company from investment in nature-based solutions. By making such an explicit statement, we are ensuring that the regulator does all that it can to advance the nature-based solutions that can make a real difference. Given all this, we encourage the government to look at this amendment closely, and if they're not keen to support it, explain why not and what are they going to do with nature-based solutions, because we feel that this particular constructive amendment is complementary to the clause, and that's why we'd like to hear from the Minister, but notwithstanding that, we would like to see what she says, but then we could likely take that to a vote.
Thank you very much, and I thank all honourable members for their thoughtful contributions during this debate and the careful consideration of the amendments put forward in relation to Clause 4. We're in danger, Mr Vickers, of having a bit of a love-in with so much agreement in this room at the moment. But turning first to Amendment 26, tabled by the honourable member for Westmoreland and Lonsdale, I was really pleased, genuinely really pleased, to see Clause 4 added at the Lord's report stage as a result of the collaborative cross-party approach to strengthening the bill so that it further encourages greater use of nature-based solutions by water companies. And I appreciate the kind comments from the opposition spokesperson on this. This is why Clause 4 of the bill requires sewage undertakers to address in their drainage and sewage management plans the use that is to be made of nature-based solutions within their networks. Sewage undertakers already have existing obligations under Section 94A of the Water Industry Act to address the sequence and timing for implementation of measures proposed in their drainage and sewage management plans. We believe that these obligations sufficiently require sewage undertakers to address the relative prioritisation of the proposed measures in their plans. Nature-based solutions are one of a diverse range of potential solutions to complex drainage and sewage issues. Clause 4 will ensure that sewage undertakers highlight the role or proposed role of nature-based solutions within their network. It is right that undertakers have due flexibility to consider the full range of solutions available to them and work with stakeholders to identify the right solutions. As much as I love nature-based solutions, and appears so does everyone in the room, as I'm sure we will all accept, it is not always appropriate to prioritise nature-based solutions ahead of other available options in every circumstance. We believe, however, that the provisions in Clause 4 will have sufficient positive effect in terms of supporting greater exploration and development of nature-based solutions without posing operational challenges for the sewage undertakers. On this basis, I ask the honourable member to withdraw his amendment. Moving now to new Clause 5, tabled by the honourable member for Epping Forest. I would like to take this opportunity to again agree and emphasise that the government thinks that nature-based solutions are critical to ensuring we have a resilient and sustainable sewage system. I am therefore delighted to inform the House that we have recently seen the regulators doing just that. In their final determinations for Price Review 24, Ofwat has set out an allowance of £3 billion for water company investment in nature-based solutions and biodiversity. This includes £2.5 billion to reduce storm overflow spills through green solutions. However, the government has noted the concerns and amendments shared in the other place, which is why we brought forward our own amendment to place a new requirement on sewage undertakers to support greater use of nature-based solutions, which now forms Clause 4 of the bill. Clause 4 will ensure nature-based solutions are considered from the start of investment planning and decision-making as a solution across multiple risks, including pollution, flooding and drainage. I trust that the Honourable Member is therefore reassured his amendment has already been provided for, and on that basis I ask the Honourable Member to withdraw his amendment. While I have already outlined some of the merits of Clause 4, I would briefly like to reiterate why this government considers the clause to be an essential part of the bill. Nature-based solutions are vital to protecting the environment and the wider water system, as well as delivering co-benefits, including protection from flooding from the public and enhancing the natural environment. And I absolutely concur with the comments made around flooding from the official spokesperson for the opposition. Clause 4 will drive further exploration and development of nature-based solutions and will require undertakers to be transparent as to how they have deployed or propose to deploy nature-based solutions within their drainage and sewerage networks. Compliance with this duty will be monitored by government and regulators. Sewage undertakers will also be required to conduct public consultation on their drainage and sewage management plans, which will allow the public to scrutinise the plans and propose changes. Therefore, to help in realising the government's desire to see further development of nature-based solutions by sewage undertakers, I move that Clause 4 stands part of the bill.
Tim Farron.
Just to add really to the words I said, but not very many of them, I promise. The simple bottom line, yes, with our proposal is that nature-based solutions obviously have a great value in terms of dealing with sewage. They also do, as has been mentioned on both sides, have a significant impact on flood prevention. And it's a reminder, I'm bound to crowbar this in, but those who work our uplands, our hill farmers, amongst the things we should be enormously grateful to them for is that their work in the uplands, if we support them properly, prevents people who live in towns and villages and cities from being flooded. And when we're looking, another part of the DEFRA brief, of course, is the environmental land management schemes and how we can look further to support those working in the uplands and our land managers, and particularly our upland farmers, tenants and owners, to be able to deliver these nature-based solutions to protect millions of homes and to avoid billions of pounds of damage, as well as, of course, helping to be part of the solution when it comes to dealing with sewage. But we won't seek to push this to a vote today.
Is everyone content for the amendment to be withdrawn? Aye. Amendment by leave withdrawn. We now come to the question that Clause 4 stand part of the bill, which has already been debated. The question is that Clause 4 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the question that Clause 5 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 5 stand part of the bill. Minister.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on the importance of Clause 5. This clause strengthens the penalty for obstructing the investigations of the Environment Agency, Natural Resource Wales and the Drinking Water Inspectorate. Obstruction of investigations by the regulator is already an offence, but this has not stopped companies from blocking the regulator's investigation. In 2019, the Environment Agency prosecuted a number of individuals at Southern Water for removing evidence from the possession of officers. I am sure you will agree that this behaviour is unacceptable. But currently, the offence for obstructing the Environment Agency and Natural Resource Wales investigatory powers under Section 108 of the Environment Act 1995 is only punishable by a fine and can only be heard in a magistrate's court. There is also no mechanism for prosecuting executives where obstruction of these powers occurs under their guidance. The offence of obstructing the Drinking Water Inspectorate is already triable in the Crown Court, but this too, however, only carries a maximum penalty of a fine. I am sure you will agree it would never be preferable to accept a fine rather than face the full consequence of law-breaking. And where law-breaking occurs with their involvement, executives should be held accountable. This clause therefore makes the offence of obstructing the Environment Agency and Natural Resources Wales powers under section 108 triable in the Crown Court. And it expands the maximum penalty for obstructing the Environment Agency, Natural Resource Wales and the Drinking Waters Inspectorate investigations to be up to 2 years imprisonment for conviction on indictment. This clause will address a notable justice gap and further deter the offence of obstruction. In turn, this should better enable our regulators to carry out their investigations uninhibited and hold water companies to account accordingly. I'm just going to finish. On this basis, I move that Clause 5 stand part of the bill.
I'm very grateful. I think this is a speech, actually, rather than an intervention, technically. I'm supportive of the content of this clause. I do have one technical question, which is, if you choose to move a penalty from a fine to one of imprisonment, you have to have a person in order to apply that penalty to, rather than a body corporate. The question that obviously arises out of that is it the intention of the government to apply that penalty to the controlling mind, or is it to a member of an organisation who may be several layers down below that of the controlling mind? Who is it who is intended that the criminal offence should be applied to, and how is the government going to ensure that there is not misunderstanding and uncertainty based on the current drafting, because it's not at all clear?
Very good. We'll assume it was an intervention, and I'll give the Minister to respond.
Okay, so individuals can already be prosecuted under Section 110 of the Environment Act 1995 for obstructing Environment Agency investigations, as mentioned. However, this legislation does not allow executives to be obstructed where, However, this legislation does not allow executives to be prosecuted where obstruction has occurred with their consent or connivance or is attributable to their neglect. This Water Special Measures Bill will remedy that omission by adding a consent, connivance or neglect provision to the Act, meaning executives or other relevant officers may face imprisonment if obstruction occurs as a consequence of their actions.
Dr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I just rise to sort of say that as the opposition, we have no formal objections to this particular clause. I just wanted to ask a couple of clarifying questions. I realise I'm getting into territory where I have no familiarity. I'm not a lawyer myself. I'm a veterinary surgeon, but I just wanted to ask along some questions in terms of when you are changing offences to be more sort of criminal, and then that has the implications for courts and people, what that will mean. So firstly, while expanding the options available to the court, when sentencing offenders who have not followed the rules is an addition and a welcome addition to this bill, how has the government ensured that the offences are clear so that those potentially committing them will face the full punishment if and as when required? And also, in terms of the modelling of this and looking at the potential impact downstream of this, what work has the government done in terms of looking retrospectively, if this had been law over the last few years, how many potential people or offenders would have been caught up with this and potentially imprisoned if this legislation had been in place? And I realise that's quite a technical question, but I just wonder if the government has done any looking of that, because I think when you bring in laws, you need to make sure that you are aware of what the implications are and how the legal and the judiciary system can actually exercise these laws. But actually, I'd like to state again that we have no formal opposition to this particular set of clauses.
Tim Farron.
Yeah, very, very briefly. Likewise, we have no objections to this at all. The concern we got, so I will, from memory, cite that in 21-22, there were just under 500,000 spillage incidents in this country. 16 of them in total, 16 were prosecuted. 8 of them were prosecuted with a fine of more than £50,000. So I think the Minister was getting at just before is that so very often it's worth taking the hit. For you, A, you get away with it. B, even if you don't get away with it, you pay a pittance compared to what it would have cost you if you'd invested properly in the infrastructure. So it is right to take these things seriously. However, prosecutions for potential imprisonment and loss of liberty may be as few and far between as prosecutions when it relates to fines, unless we make sure the whole process is more rigorous than it has been so far. But we're supportive of this clause, and I need to say nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to raise one minor point, that public confidence in us restoring our water systems is the reason why we're here doing this bill. Fergal Sharkey, who has been a main campaigner who many people up and down the country listen to, recently wrote an article where he said that due to this legislation, no water boss would ever go to prison. Would you be able to give comments on that, please, Minister, to give confidence to people that are watching this proceeding?
Thank you. And just to say, I am obviously a bit of a fangirl of Fergal Sharkey, not least because of his musical career before entering the field of environmental campaigning. And of course, we don't expect this measure to material impact court case numbers. The intention, of course, is to deter offending, and not all cases will go to the Crown Court, but it is right that this is a possibility. Obstruction of the Environment Agency emergency powers under Section 109 of the Environment Act is already triable in the Crown Court. And the EA will consult on updating the enforcement sanctions policy to make sure that it's absolutely clear. And while this is not a new offence, what we're talking about is changing the maximum penalty involved in the offence because of the justice gap that I already mentioned. Because previously it was only punishable by fine, it was only heard in the Magistrates' Court, and we're moving it to be punishable in the Crown Court and including a prison sentence with it. But I'm pleased that there's lots of agreement on the importance of this, and I think that we are talking about something very serious here. We're talking about obstructing the Environment Agency or the Drinking Water Inspectorate from going about and collecting the evidence that they require. This is a serious matter, and I think it deserves a serious penalty. So I thank the honourable members for their views on the clause. However, nothing that has been said, of course, detracts from the importance of addressing the justice gap, and I'm pleased that there is agreement, which has on occasion been exploited by water companies. I therefore beg to move that the clause stands part of the bill.
The question is that clause 5 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to the question that clause 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 6 stand part of the bill. Minister.
Thank you. Regulators can currently impose civil penalties where they are satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that an offence has been committed. These civil penalties are imposed by the regulators rather than through the courts. The criminal standard of proof is appropriate for severe offences, for example, where there is a major impact on human health, quality of life, or the environment. The high investigatory burden is not proportionate for minor to moderate offences which have a lower impact. Clause 6 will allow these offences to be enforced more quickly, cost-effectively and proportionately by enabling penalties to be imposed using the civil standard of proof, which is, quote, on the balance of probabilities. These penalties will be in addition to existing enforcement options that can only be imposed using the criminal standard of proof, including prosecution and unlimited variable monetary penalties, which will remain unchanged. Of course, the most serious cases will still require criminal proceedings. The government will consult on the specific offences for which the new civil standard of proof may be used and on the cap for the new lower standard of proof variable monetary penalties. There are no plans to remove unlimited penalties for severe offences. Parliament will then debate and vote on secondary legislation before any changes were made. This clause will strengthen the power of the water industry regulators, driving improved performance in the sector, and I therefore move that clause 6 stands part of the bill.
Dr. Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Vickers. I note that clause 6 would grant the Secretary of State and Welsh ministers the power to introduce secondary legislation concerning fixed and variable monetary penalties, as confirmed by the Enforcement and Sanctions Act of 2008, and would likewise change the condition of imposing these penalties from beyond reasonable doubt to on the balance of probabilities. While we as His Majesty's Opposition have no problems with this particular clause, we do believe it would be beneficial if the Minister potentially could respond to some clarification points in this particular clause that would be helpful to explaining the reading of the clause moving forward. Firstly, how often does the Minister think that secondary legislation may be required for the fixed monetary penalties? During the last government's period in office, we knew that sometimes penalties needed to be adapted to truly get regulation of our water industries right. As I've already discussed earlier in the previous debates, the Conservative government saw fit to amend the amount that water companies can be fined for violating the rules when it comes to water quality. As was also mentioned earlier, the Minister, the Minister's colleague Baroness Hayman in the other place highlighted flexibility when it comes to changing rules on the water industry. And the opposition would agree that flexibility very much is important. But in order for there to be flexibility, there also needs to be consistency and awareness and monitoring of the issue that needs to know exactly what flexibility may actually be needed. Could the Minister therefore please provide some comment now or in due course on whether it will intend to ensure that they will be continuously updating and monitoring to ensure monetary penalties are indeed having the desired outcome, and remain aware of any of the potential arising issues, and if they need to modulate and change things moving forward. I would also like to ask the Minister in this particular clause as well whether she supports the use of secondary legislation to increase scrutiny. As we've already discussed earlier today, the government have potentially sought to avoid the responsibility of accountability at ministerial and government level of using statutory instruments when it comes to things like Ofwat's remuneration and governance guidance. Can they not see that perhaps there's a bit of a discrepancy here that remains, and if they are willing to use available powers to make change but not enhance powers, they might need to do that when it comes to other issues that we have discussed? So it's just a little bit of a discrepancy moving forward. But barring these comments and clarifying questions, we have no formal objections that we wish to raise with this particular clause.
Minister, did you want to come back at all?
Yeah, no, happy to. We'll just finish writing my response. Thank all my members for their contribution during this debate. And I think the point that my honourable friend and my friend, Baroness Hayman, made in the Lords is that we do need some flexibility, and it would be inappropriate to set out the details of implementing these powers on the face of the bill, because this would result in a fixed power which would not be adaptable to the industry's circumstances, and we'd like to be able to continue to adapt it. I think though, I think the spokesperson is getting at is making sure we set things in the right way, and making sure that it's set at the right level. And that's why the Ofwat are going to be doing a consultation to look at exactly, because you want the level to be a deterrent, not something that water companies can easily dismiss, but it needs to be set at the right level. And I think it's important that that's done properly and that's done through consultation. But I think I'm grateful that everybody supports the importance of this clause in strengthening the powers of the water industry regulators and therefore driving improved performance in the sector. I therefore move that Clause 6 stand part of the bill.
The question is that Clause 6 stand part of the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Jeff Smith.
I beg to move that further consideration of the bill be now adjourned.
Question is that the further consideration be now adjourned. So many of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order.